Welcome to the Clear the Shelf podcast with Chris and Chris, the show that meets at the intersection of education and entertainment to discuss online arbitrage, retail arbitrage, wholesale, and all facets of selling on Amazon. We'll bring you news, tactics, strategies, insights, stories, and interviews to help you grow your Amazon business. And now, here are your hosts, Chris Grant and Chris Rasick. What's up, Amazon sellers, and welcome back to the Clear the Shelf podcast with myself and my bellipotent co-host, Chris Rasick. This week, we've got Niki Moore on the show. You may know him as Nicholas Moore on Twitter, also the founder and owner of Identify Suite. Now, our goal this week is to learn how Niki's grown his Amazon business and how we can apply his strategies to our own businesses to help you and us become better sellers. Now, before we dive in, you guys know the drill. It takes us minutes to prepare for this show. So if you take something away from this episode, do us a solid, leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform, or drop a comment and let us know. Those digital high fives make us want to keep coming back and make more content for you, bring more interviews to you, and bring you more education to make you a better seller. So let's dive in. Niki, welcome to the show, man. I appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Thanks, Chris and Chris. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we've got and you've already commented on it off air, but we've got a litany of questions for you. But before we dive in, I was hoping you could set the table just a little bit. Like, give me your background. How did you start selling on Amazon? What got you into it? What made you decide this over another opportunity? I just kind of want to hear, what got you going?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I started in late 2022. And so to give some background, before 2022, what was I doing? For the most part, I was in college. And so I was at UC Berkeley. I ran track there. And I also did rugby later in my career after I got injured running track. And so while I was injured running track, I got a stress fracture. No fun. I couldn't walk for a while. And so I needed something to do that was online, virtual, because I wanted to make money. I had this period where I was playing video games for probably 10 to 12 hours a day. And it was just this really awkward period where I was very social. I get this injury. I can't walk. I'm on a scooter pushing myself around. And I'm like, okay, what am I going to do during this time? And I had a buddy, I forget exactly who introed me to this, but I started reselling sneakers. And so I hit my first raffle online. It was a sneakers raffle. And I ended up selling the shoe that I bought. I purchased it, I think it was $160 or $170. Ended up selling it for nearly $500 and just making an absolute killing on that one product. It was something like $350 or $400 profit just from that one flip. And I said, okay, this is insane. I need to get more into this. Let's see if I can scale this thing. But then I hit probably a 9 to 10 month dead period where I never made over $1,000 in a single month. And then COVID happened. And so when COVID happened, as you guys probably know, e-commerce just went insane. Sneakers were going insane. Crypto was going insane. Amazon FBA, which I was not yet doing, was probably going insane. And was able to scale that sneaker resale business pretty aggressively. But then after COVID stimulus checks stopped going out, people stopped throwing $300, $400, $500 at a single pair of sneakers. Probably rightfully so. And so as that started to happen, people started having less disposable income. My sneaker business started to kind of tail off. And so I saw sales start to die down, and I'm looking around. I'm about to graduate college. I'm saying, okay, my sneaker business, while still doing, decently well, was not growing anymore. And so I started looking around and saying, okay, what else are people doing? How else are people making money? And I had a few friends that were doing Amazon. And so I tried it very, very, simply and just kind of without doing a whole lot of planning. And so I just dove in, said, okay, if I just make my first sale, I'll figure it out from there. And I made my first sale, made a few mistakes, and I ended up losing a bunch of money because I did something wrong. I sent in a shipment that I made a mistake in how I, designated the items that were going in. Amazon loses the shipment, and because of how I created the shipment the wrong way, they couldn't recover it. They couldn't reimburse me or anything like that. And so that sucked. But then 10 months later, so later, or maybe 8 months later in 2022, I ended up seeing more tweets about it, seeing other people offering these coaching programs. And I said, okay, I'm going to try and do it right this time. I'm just going to buy a course, pay for some information. And then that was in October of 2022. And then from there, learned all the right ways to do things. And then leveraging all of the information and kind of the infrastructure that I had set up from the sneaker resale business, I was able to have the big ascension and hit some good months right off the bat. And then obviously scale pretty aggressively in that first year as a full seller.
Nice. So I'm curious. You said something there. You went to college, and it's very popular today, especially among the entrepreneur crowd on Twitter and things like that, to say college is worthless. What is your opinion of college? Are you happy you finished, or do you think you could have done something else? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it's a big question. I mean, purely from an economic standpoint, it's hard to justify spending 20, 30, $40,000 per year on college if you think, oh, I can just make 10 to 20K or 5, 10, 20K from doing e-commerce, which requires no degree. Maybe I pay a small upfront cost to learn all this stuff, maybe a course or something. With that said, I value my college education. I think it sets up, your Amazon business, you can be self-employed, you can learn all these different things, you can make some good money. I really like having sort of that backstop of I have a degree, I have a formal education. If I ever want to go do things down the line that are, bigger than just Amazon resale, I can point to my degree and say, hey, I went to UC Berkeley, I learned all these things. I'm sort of classically trained in a sense, where you can relate to a lot of people that just in like more advanced business discussions, if you want to raise money, for example, you don't necessarily need a college degree by any means, but you're at least able to relate to people. I also think socially, you learn a lot of different things, both about yourself and about how to interact with other people. So it's mostly, obviously, I think there are still benefits from an academic perspective. You learn a lot, but I think you can learn a lot on YouTube, right? And so I think more of the value just comes from the social aspect, meeting people. And I think how people traditionally talk about getting your MBA, your master's in business administration. People look at it and they say, okay, it's not really for the information that I'm going for, it's more for the connections. And so now I'm able to, my phone is full of contacts of people that are going and they're working at these big companies, and I can text them anytime and just talk to them, bounce ideas off of them. And so I hear it a lot, but it's really about the network, and more so I think what you learn about yourself during that period, as opposed to at this point, the education, unless you're learning a very hard technical skill. But even then, I think apprenticeships are probably even more useful than a traditional college education, just because you get on the job training on what specifically you're going to be doing at a company or within a role. So yeah, I mean, if I had to go back and do it again, I'd probably go to college because I didn't know what I wanted to do coming right out of high school. But if you know exactly what you want to do, I would think that an apprenticeship in, a highly technical field is probably a better use of your time at this point. If you're like, okay, I'm dead set on becoming an electrician, for example, or I'm dead set on running this type of business. From an economic standpoint, it definitely makes more sense. You wouldn't have to deal with a bunch of sort of prereq classes. Like I did an art history class. I didn't give a crap about history at all. And so it's kind of a waste of time. You cut that stuff out with these different apprenticeship programs. And so, yeah, those are kind of my thoughts.
Much more balanced answer than entrepreneur Twitter. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, I see both sides.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, you had pretty massive growth. Like you went from 20K a month to 635K a month, or in that area, like in a single year. Mm-hmm. Can you kind of talk to us about or walk us through what changed in your business to allow for that kind of growth? Because there's not a whole lot of people hitting those kind of numbers like in 1 year.
Yeah, no, it was big. It was a crazy year. So when I started, my first month I did 20K. So that was November of 2022. And that's my first full month. I think I started making purchases in early October, did probably a few thousand in sales in October, and then November, December of 2022 really kicked things off. But then I hit this big plateau after that. So I scaled really hard. I did 100K in total in my first 2 months. Then that next January, February, March, April, didn't eclipse $80,000 in sales. I was kind of stuck in that $30,000 to $40,000 range. And during that period, so kind of to set the stage, right? I had capital. That was not limiting me. I was working full-time at Morgan Stanley, which is an investment bank. And so I was making a good salary. I was able to take that money and funnel it into inventory if I chose to do so. I also had made money as a sneaker reseller. So one thing that I always like to talk about is just what is your limiting factor? What is stopping you from hitting higher numbers, whether it's sales, profit, and just in life generally. If you want to do something, you've got to figure out what's stopping you from doing it before you just try and do it. Otherwise, you're just kind of aimlessly going through trying to achieve this thing without being strategic about it. And so I looked at it and I said, okay, I'm being limited by time and knowledge. Those are the two things that are keeping me from growing further. And so I just went about solving those two things. So I bought a course initially when I first started, mainly learning retail arbitrage and online arbitrage. That's where I was comfortable. In April, I bought a wholesale course. And so that was another big investment. And so that's sort of a theme that that I should highlight with my whole journey is I'm always willing to pay for information and invest in myself and in my knowledge and in my network to get to the next level. Because I know from past experience that that is the best way to do it, at least for me personally. And so I get this wholesale course and I also bring a partner on at the same time. So I had a buddy in college, his name's Shane. And so I brought him into the business and I said, Shane, I'm limited by time and also knowledge. I don't know how to do wholesale. I would like I'll pay you to go and do this course with me, learn everything, and then also do some of the things that would be required of you once you learn everything inside this course. So making calls to wholesalers, doing some of the sourcing, figuring out how to use Smart Scout and these price scanners, getting these UPC lists, all these sorts of things. And then the big catalyst that took us kind of out of that plateau of that 40 to 60K in sales range was we implemented wholesale, and we also found what I would call my first Grand Slam product. And so a Grand Slam product is basically a very rare product that you can sell for months or years. It's an extremely high volume item in terms of it sells a lot of units per month, or it sells a lot of just, dollar volume per month. So we found our first one of those in July of 2023, and then also implementing wholesale, those two things really coupling up along with the just substantial volume increase in Q4 of 2023 is what just allowed us to explode higher and just inject, things like leverage, put more capital to work, of my personal cash into inventory. And so those are, that's kind of how it all happened from a high level.
Nice. Now, not a capital aside. So you were well capitalized, which not everyone is, but I mean, that's everyone's situation is different, but capital aside, there's not a whole lot of people who are willing to take such big swings so early on Amazon, number one, but even in any new business. What is it that made you more comfortable taking those big swings so early on?
Yeah, so I think that just goes back to the information that I was able to invest in. And so let's say, Chris, you're an experienced seller, you know a lot. And so if I were to pay you money to teach me stuff, I would listen to what you say. And then I'd let your past experience inform my decisions on what I want to do. And so if I had, this is something that actually happened. I was landing my first brand direct account. This experience didn't go great in general, but this is just one such example where I meet this brand and I end up flying out to their warehouse in North Carolina. And they're 3PL. Because I just want to make sure that I'm not going to send a large wire to a company that doesn't even exist, basically. So I fly out and I meet them. I make sure everything's good, and it's going to be a large purchase. And so I call one of my mentors, one of the guys that I paid to teach me, and I said, "Hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing. What do you think?" And so he gave me his thoughts. And basically, I was able to just go through all the questions that I had and say, "Okay, does it check this box? Does it check this box? Does it check this box?" And just kind of clear the fog around the situation, get rid of any sort of ambiguity, and get someone else's experience or someone else's insight that is much more experienced than I am. And so really leveraging the experience of other people when you're newer. And as long as you trust that person and you think that they are smart, hopefully you do, otherwise you wouldn't have paid them, then you can leverage their experience to get to a better outcome for yourself much quicker. And then also the other thing is, when I made that big jump, I was already a year into selling, and that doesn't sound like a long time, especially within the context of the numbers that I was able to do. But I also was leveraging what I learned as a sneaker reseller. And so I think I was 2 to maybe 2.5 years of sneaker reselling, where I had gone from $2,000 in my bank account to then selling like $5,000 in sneakers every single day, which was just a completely transformational thing. And that all happened within a year period when I first started. And so just understanding what your worst case scenario is, what are you going to do with the product if something goes wrong, and just being very data driven and leveraging the people around you that know more than you do when you're first starting are all sort of the secrets that that took me to where I am now.
Niki, you mentioned the plateau. I want to stay on that topic for a little bit. I think when you look back over the course of a business's history, plateau usually isn't singular. There's usually multiple. So kind of outside of the numbers, when you were breaking through that plateau before you hit the big growth, can you talk about what you learned, kind of not from a numbers perspective, but if you hit the next plateau, what did you take from that experience that'll get you past the next one when you hit it?
Yeah, definitely. So plateau, it just goes again back to your limiting factor. And so what is stopping you? What's the thing that you're stuck in this plateau? What is the thing? What is the thing that's stopping you? And so really focusing on that. And I think there's three things total. So one is capital, the second is time, and the third is knowledge. You don't know what to buy. And so just figuring out, okay, what is the thing that's stopping me? And then there are a bunch of different ways that you can solve for those things. I just made a video about this, a YouTube video, not to self-plug too hard or anything, but I just dive really deep into this topic on what is actually the thing that's holding you back. Is it money? If so, go and solve for that. If it's time, okay, understand, find different ways to solve for the time factor. And if it's education, find a different way to solve for the education. And so I'd consider myself to be in a plateau even right now, where my sales have hit a certain level and it's hard for me to push past that. And it's just a matter of figuring out, okay, what is the actual thing that is stopping me from going further? Are there not enough new products being added to my catalog? Is it the fact that I don't have money to purchase the products that I'm finding? Or is it just that I can't spend enough time to go and find those products, or I don't have enough people within my team going and searching for those new products? And so when I was in that, $30,000 to $50,000 range, the thing that was limiting me was what to buy. I didn't know what to buy because I didn't have this sort of repository of data of, I've sold all these things in the past and I can purchase some of them again. Some of them are maybe seasonal replens. And then also time. I didn't have the time to go and do more sourcing to go and find those new products. So I think it all just goes back to your limiting factor in terms of your plateau. And if you want to break out, it's just about figuring out how to solve that limiting factor.
What now, you, through talking to other sellers and networking and people that you come across, what if the answer doesn't neatly fall into one of those three? What if you get an inkling that it's more mentality? Do you have advice in that circumstance?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. It's not one that I typically consider. Well, I guess it would sort of fall into education. I just like knowledge generally, because I think your mentality, it falls into the bucket of knowledge. You don't know what to do when you come across a certain problem, and you have a limiting belief perhaps. I just say that in terms of breaking down limiting beliefs, talk to someone who's ahead of you. And if you can probably get access to those people on Twitter. You can probably shoot people a DM and just say, hey, this is something I'm dealing with. What is holding me back? Why can't I do this? But yeah, I mean, limiting beliefs, they're huge. And I think I sent out a tweet recently that said the most harmful kind of limiting belief is that there aren't limiting beliefs and that your mindset can't change where you are. So there's some people that will say mentality is BS, limiting beliefs, they're not a thing. It's just like you do the thing, and if you're good at it, you win, and if you're bad at it, you don't. And so reading anecdotes from other people, reading business books. I have behind me, you can see, I just have a ton of business books of people that have been greatly successful. A lot of them talk about, my mentality when I was doing this was wrong. I was thinking about these things the wrong way, and just a mental shift was able to take my business and explode it higher. One great example is 4-Hour Workweek. I think it's right there, that orange one right there. And so that's a book that I read probably 3 or 4 years ago where, Tim Ferriss just talks about all the different things that he was stuck doing when his business was, I forget exactly the level, but he was in a plateau. And he said, okay, I'm limited by this, this, and this, and I don't think that these things can work. And he basically went to the extreme, and he tore down his business basically. Like, I think he went on a long vacation, and then it took him basically detonating and like getting so overworked that he was so fed up with his business that he just completely left, to then come back to his business a few months later and realize that things were going better than ever with the team that he had in place. So reading anecdotes like that, because it's very hard to break out of something if you don't understand and you aren't exposed to people that have been through the same thing that you're in. I think one thing that has helped me is just being on Twitter and being on money Twitter specifically, and being exposed to people that are just ahead of me. And then my mentality is there's this random dude that's doing this. He's hitting these huge numbers. He has this hugely successful business. He has achieved freedom in all the senses that I would personally want to achieve freedom. And so if he can do it, why can I not do it? Like, what is stopping me from doing it? And the answer has always come back to me and been, there is nothing stopping me. I just have to learn what my limiting factor is. What do I not know that he knows? And then go and learn that thing. So
I like that. Once you scaled, I'm curious about your product mix, and I especially want to go back to this Grand Slam product that you talk, Grand Slam products that you talk about. Like, how much of your sales come from this small group of Grand Slam products versus maybe just the doubles and singles that you're hitting?
Yeah, so at this point, I largely ignore singles and doubles. I don't even buy them. And so these are products where I could make money. Maybe, and I'm not saying that you should do this at every point in your business, but once you start to scale, it becomes a risk from an account health perspective. There's also difficulties with ungating. There's also just operational drag where you have to add different ASINs to your catalog. You have to make purchases from different locations. Even if it's just a wholesale order where you add a new product, it has to get prepped differently if you do in-house prep, all these sorts of things. So at this point, I'm basically only targeting Grand Slam products. But that was very different when I first started. When I first started, I was buying anything and everything that was profitable. And so that was comprised largely of singles and doubles. And when you're first starting, it's very hard. And again, I'll just mention, Grand Slam product, I'll give a definition, is something that sells a tremendously high volume. And that's essentially the only qualification. So you find a product that sells a very high volume. It could be in units, it could be 1,000 units per month, or it could be in dollar amounts. So you could find a product that sells 100 times a month, but it's, let's just say, a $2,000 product, for example. And so if you sell that several times a month, that's a huge amount of sales. And so that one product just carries your catalog. And it's sort of a derivative of the Pareto principle. And so the 80-20 rule, where 20% of your results can actually be attributed to 20% of the inputs. And so I think it's even more extreme in my catalog. I think the top, or maybe not, because I've just decreased the amount of products that are in my catalog. But in terms of mix, to give you like a very direct answer, Grand Slam products are probably at this point 80 to 90% of my sales on a monthly basis. But earlier on, it was probably completely the opposite. 90% were singles and doubles, and I didn't know what my Grand Slam products were, or at least I wasn't sourcing with that in mind. I was just thinking, oh, I can make $100 here. I'm going to buy 50 of this product and sell it and make my $100. But as you grow, if you want to scale, if you want to go further, you have to cut those out because they add time lag and they just add all these operational sort of drags on your business unless you bring additional people on. And my team is very small. So a part of that is also that with the context that it's me and one VA that works for 2 hours a day, and that's it.
Wow.
Right.
But that's what that allows you to do, is just buying these huge volume movers. It allows you to keep a very, very light operation. And because I put out a screenshot recently, or I was digging into my numbers, right? And so in the past 30 days, I think I've sold less than 30 unique products. And I think I did $200,000 in sales in that month. And so for most people, they look at that and they're like, what? That doesn't make any sense. Like, my catalog is 600 products and I sell way less than you sell. And it just goes back to that concept of, if you focus your energy, all your time and energy, on just finding the highest volume sellers, and you find just a few of them, then great. And then hopefully you just make those last as long as you possibly can. But it just takes out a whole lot of different issues that I think a lot of people run into when they're operating their business. It does add risk, I will say. It does not allow you to diversify as well. The way in which I've changed how I diversify is I just make sure that the product I'm selling, I can sell multi-channel. So that's the way I diversify, as opposed to diversifying within the catalog. I can diversify within the platform and just say, okay, if my Amazon account got shut down tomorrow, I know exactly where all these products would go. And so it kind of de-stresses me. And that's the way I've changed the way I diversify.
I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah.
Yeah, let's dig into sourcing a little bit, because now that's, I understand the high volume, so you mitigate risk by going multi-platform. However, I'm of the opinion that every product's profitability lifespan is finite. right? So at some point in time, you're likely to have to replenish one of these grand slams. So when you get into that process, and you've talked about one of the things that we like to talk about a lot. I think Keepa is the hidden unlock for a lot of people, and everyone pays for it, and they don't quite know how powerful it is. But you specifically talked about how deep you go on a Keepa chart. So I want to know, when you're looking at a potential product for your inventory, for your catalog, what specific data points in those charts are you looking for, and what are the differences in the charts that tips you off that this could be a Grand Slam product?
Yeah, so it's a good question. The key thing again is just volume. Does it sell? It's like the key one. And then obviously there's certain things you have to deal with. Getting ungated. Is there a huge seller on the listing that's going to come in and tank your listing and be able to take all the sales volume, even if you're matched at the same price? Does Amazon sell the product? All these sorts of things. But in terms of reading a Keepa chart, I go back. So I'll just give you sort of the breakdown. How do I actually look at a chart, right? I start with the 3-month. And then looking at the 3-month, I just scroll over the chart and I say, okay, are multiple people getting sales? Are they getting buy box share? And you can typically see that within a Keepa chart. Sometimes you can't, because Keepa pulls, I believe it's a regional buy box. And so the buy box is different across the country. I'm not sure if everyone knows this, but the buy box for me here in California is different than for Chris in Florida, and is different for someone who's in New York, who's in Montana, who's in New Hampshire, et cetera. And the reason for that is that the product, Amazon's going to give the buy box to whoever has the product closest to the customer and is also relatively close to the buy box price. And so when I'm looking at the buy box, or when I'm looking at the Keepa chart, I want to make sure I can make sales. It's like the first thing, or it's the second thing after volume. Then from there, I like to have a low seller count. I don't like to see volatility in the seller count. And so I'll typically look at Identify, which is the sourcing calculator that I use. And we have a score that says, okay, what's the volatility of the seller count? Does it have big spikes up and down? And or is it just like a flat line? And I like to look for those flat lines, because I don't want unexpected people jumping on the listing. And I typically like to look at a flat line, or maybe in a certain range. So it's like 5 to 15 sellers, and it's been that way for the last 2 years. That's great for me. I don't like to see products where it goes from 20 sellers up to 300 sellers and then back down, unless it's a very cyclical product. You see that with a lot of back to school products, for example. And those can be grand slams, but they're very seasonal grand slams. And you can probably see that when you're looking at the monthly sales. So yeah, those are some of my tips. The other thing, obviously, don't want to have IP complaints the way I look, or any authenticity claim issues for the most part. If you see a large steep drop off in seller count in just one single day, it'll look like just a straight line down. Avoid those at all costs, never touch them. And then if the brand is on the listing, I avoid it like the plague. I never sell if the brand is selling the product. It's just a recipe for running into issues. So yeah, I think that's relatively comprehensive.
Now, I know you like high volume products, but I've seen you talk about discontinued products in the past as well, and how they can create some outsized opportunities.
Oh yeah.
How do you go about identifying when a product is being discontinued, or when it's being liquidated versus just temporarily being out of stock? And how do you try to capture as much of that inventory as possible?
Yeah, so what I have sort of an advantage at this point, and I think bigger sellers, newer sellers, this might be hard for, unless you're well capitalized. But if you buy stock with the idea of staying in stock for that product for longer than just, let's say, a month, you have a huge advantage. So if you take a longer term view, you could say, okay, I'm going to buy 6 months of stock for this product. And obviously the big guys, this strategy works better for them. But even if you're newer, you can access cheaper free capital with certain types of loan facilities or credit facilities to be able to also lean on this strategy. So how do you know if a product is discontinued? Sometimes the brand will come out and tell you. And if they don't tell you on the product listing, how can you figure it out? Well, could you look and see if there's a new version of that product? So for example, Nike, let's say. A lot of sellers can't sell Nike, so it's good to use for examples. I can no longer sell Nike personally. It's something that I sold in the past. But for Nike, if you see it's on V3 of a shoe and V4 just dropped, then you look at the price and you say, oh, this is on a clearance price. Why is this $30 instead of the retail price, which is 70? That could be a potential, clearance sale before the product gets discontinued, and they just now focus on the newer model. And the other thing you can do is talk to customer service, because customer service, in a lot of cases, they have access to stuff that is not publicly available. And the other thing is, you're probably underestimating how much customer service can help you, can do for you. It's not like Amazon seller support. I think a lot of sellers have not so great experiences with Amazon seller support on a just litany of different ways in which they're seeking support. But these other companies, they're trying to sell you stuff. Amazon, they're just trying to, they're trying to do their own thing. They're trying to sell your stuff, but they're, a lot of the things that sellers are asking for would hurt Amazon. You're looking for a reimbursement. You're looking to have them do stuff for you. The customer service reps at these other companies, they're trying to sell you a product. And if they sell you more product, they make more money. And so, things like asking for a discount code, asking if things are going out of stock, asking if they can provide invoices for you, asking perhaps, this one's more niche and not a lot of big brands or anything will do, or well, I guess big retailers will do this for you, but hey, is there any, could you point me to a distributor? That's sort of more so for if you're doing brand direct, but you're probably underestimating how much customer service at these different brands or retailers can do for you. And so leaning on them specifically also for discontinued information is wise.
That's a good point. Hey, so you've talked about showing up every day to source, but not necessarily buying every day. And I think that's an interesting concept. It kind of shows patience and discipline. Obviously, it works for your sourcing strategy. But so I'm curious, what does your daily sourcing routine actually look like? And how do you train yourself to recognize the specific opportunities that you're looking for?
Yeah, it's a great question. So a lot of my sourcing at this point is automated. And so what I mean by that is I used to do a lot of manual sourcing. And also, just to go back to the quote that you just mentioned, show up every day, don't act every day, but you need to at least see the opportunity set. That is a lesson that someone or a wealth advisor at Morgan Stanley told me. And so just going back even further to our discussion about college and traditional education, I wouldn't have gotten that job if I didn't go to college, if I wasn't a good student, and if I basically skipped college, if I skipped college and I just applied, wouldn't have got the job. And so that lesson is still, compounding and helping me in this business. But what I mean by show up every day, but don't act every single day, is the opportunity set is different every single day. So if we look at it, like a very obvious example is Black Friday. You're going to sell a lot of stuff, but also it's the best sales day of the entire year for the most part, right? You're going to see crazy deals, blowout sales, clearance, all these sorts of things because sites want you to buy. So today, Labor Day, not the best example, but maybe in a week from today, or maybe, a week from today, it's going to be September 8th. And the opportunity set, the products that you might be able to buy are not going to be as opportune as on a huge sales day. And so you have to show up still, because on the off chance that there is a huge sale, something gets discontinued, there's a random flash sale, you have to at least be checking these things. But if the opportunity is not there, why are you going to put your money, why are you going to deploy your money on something that just isn't a great opportunity? And then take on additional risk because your buy cost is higher, all these sorts of things. And so I've really emphasized, within my mentorship groups and on social media, is just when you see an opportunity, you need to act on it immediately and aggressively. And it's probably happened to you guys. I'm sure it's happened to probably every single Amazon seller that does arbitrage. But you say, this product's on sale. That's a great deal. I'll buy it tomorrow. And then what happens in that case? The sale ends. And then you're sitting there like, oh my God, I had this awesome product that I was going to buy, and I just didn't have the time that day, or I wasn't ready to commit, all these sorts of things. That's happened to me countless times. And so using that, that data that I've got, that experience has just led me to acting as soon as I see a product that I think is going to do well, analyzing it, and then making the purchases and just going hard if I don't think that I'm going to see a better opportunity for the next week, month, quarter, etc. So I guess going back to the sourcing, like the specifics too, how do I automate these things? Leverage software. And then also you can leverage your past data. So I use tools that can basically pull information from my catalog in the past and say, hey, the buy box price is up, maybe 20%, maybe 30%. And you can just set an alert and say, hey, this product is is way higher than what you used to sell it at. Your ASP, your average sale price, was $20. Now the product's at $30. Do you think you can go and buy the product at, maybe roughly the same price? And maybe not all sales occur there, right? But if you could get it at the same price, then that is just one sort of example of how you can automate sourcing based on work that you've already done. And so just leveraging that work you've already done, I'm really big on that, and not letting the work that you've done go to waste after just the initial sale of the product.
It's becoming a recurring theme with several of our past guests.
Nice.
What you just said. So thank you for listening to the Clear the Shelf podcast. My magnanimous co-host Chris Rasick has put together a gift for you for being a listener. It's called the Monthly Goal Tracking Spreadsheet, and it's free. The spreadsheet will help you break down and track how much you've purchased, which should be a leading indicator of how much you will sell, and then you'll be able to track how much you've sold as well as your estimated monthly profit on a daily basis. This will all feed into the daily averages so you can ensure that you're on track to meet your goals each and every month. Grab it for free today over at cleartheshelf.com/goal-tracking. Thanks again for being a listener. Now back to the show. All right, let's talk about leverage a little bit, because in the growth that you've had, obviously had to come through some leverage, and I've seen that you've even written that you're willing to carry some serious debt. And so I'm just going to ask a blunt question. What's the most you've ever been in debt for your business?
Probably upwards of $500,000. Yeah, at one time.
Okay.
The mix for that was during my $635K December of 2023, where I probably had $300,000 on credit cards, maybe a little more, honestly. And then I maxed out a term loan. So I got a loan from Lendistry, which is an Amazon partner. That came through Amazon Seller Central. They said, hey, we want to give you $150,000. I said, okay, I don't know if I have that many leads. I'll take 100. And so that's what I did. I took 100. Then I also had a relatively small, friends and family loan, and also a maxed out line of credit from Amex, which is very high interest, very predatory. Don't recommend using it unless you have something that is very, very, a very high, high volume seller that you can make a ton of money on in a short period of time and pay that back as soon as you can. And then I think within the credit card mix, I have 2 credit cards that I use for the most part: Chase Business Premier Inc. and Capital One Spark. And so those were both basically maxed out. And I also had some 0% intro APR credit cards that were also maxed out. So yeah, at one point it was crazy. I went and I took screenshots of everything, and I was like, okay, I'm going to look back at this and just acknowledge how absolutely insane it is. And the only reason I can leverage, I know this is turning into a longer answer, so I'll stop it after this, but the only reason you should take on leverage is leverage is risk. It amplifies your result in either way. If you're bad, it amplifies you in the negative direction. You're going to suck with leverage. If you're good, it can make you great, but it does add risk. And so what has helped me be able to take on significant leverage is understanding my billing cycle. When is the money actually due to be paid back? And then also understanding how much money in cash flow I'm going to be getting from my Amazon payouts. So I take on-demand disbursements. If I know that, for example, I'm going to be getting paid out $5,000 per day, then I know, okay, over the course of the next 2 weeks, that's going to be $70,000. What is my credit card bill that's going to be due in 3 weeks, for example? If it's $70K, then I know that I'm going to have, a week to spare of, in case anything goes wrong and I have to do some gymnastics to go and figure out how to do it. So, yeah.
Perfect. Now, I was wondering, that actually reminds me of one of my favorite Charlie Munger quotes. It's like, what are the 3 things that can ruin a business? It's liquor, ladies, and leverage. Yep. I believe is his quote. But can you kind of walk us through how, or if you have a kind of a credit maximization strategy? Like, do you work on aligning billing cycles? How are you managing cash flow? And then I'm also curious, to be able to get that kind of credit and access those kind of limits, what does your credit score or business profile need to look like?
Yeah, good questions. So credit maximization, absolutely. It's one of the first things that I learned, even with sneakers, is you want to be spending on the first part of your billing cycle. So your billing cycle, basically there's a charge period. I forget the exact terminology, but you have 1 month where you spend all this money. And then at the end of the month, they say your billing or your repayment date, your statement date, your billing date, I don't know. When you have to repay all the money that you spend that month, it's typically 3 weeks after the billing period closes. And so if you spend on the very first day of your billing period, then you're not due to repay that money for 7 weeks. That's better than if you spend on the last day of your billing period, and then you only have 3 weeks until you have to put cash back to the credit card company and repay your bill without being charged any interest. Which I don't recommend paying interest on any credit cards. You're going to be charged upwards of 20%, most likely in interest. That's not a position anybody wants to be in. So I have 2 credit cards, like I mentioned, the Chase card and the Capital One card. And those are split, or they're offset by 2 weeks in terms of when the billing period starts. And so if you have 2 cards, you want to offset them by 2 weeks. And the reason for that is you're basically taking the number of credit cards you have, I have 2, and you're cutting the billing period in half. So 30 days, you're going to want them roughly 2 weeks apart. One starts on, for example, the 1st of the month, and the second credit card would start on the 15th of the month. And so then whenever you start a new billing period on either card, you're going to want to spend on that card for 2 weeks. And then that's how you achieve the ability to spend money and then not have to pay it back for 5 to 7 weeks. And then if you have more cards, let's say you have 6 cards, for example, just take 30 days, divide it by 6, and then you want a new billing period to start every 5 days in that case. So that's how I've done it. And yeah, it's turned out pretty good. I haven't run into too many issues so far. And it just lets you stretch your money. Then in terms of credit profile, my credit was very high. I think it's taken some hits more recently because I've been carrying more debt than is typical, I guess, on different vehicles, like on different cards, in different facilities, all these sorts of things. But when I was applying for these cards, I didn't get the limits that I have now. So I have very high limits. What you should probably start with is a charge card. So a charge card basically means you have no preset limit, and it just adjusts to your spend level and your repayments. And so if you spend $2,000 on the card and you pay it back, they might up your soft limit to $4,000. Then if you max that and pay it off with no issues, maybe they then up it to $8,000. Then if you do it again, then maybe it all of a sudden jumps to 20. And so that's a way that if you don't have, very high credit, more for beginners, you get that charge card and you just grow into it. The other thing I should mention is I've been doing this for now 5 years almost. And so I've built my credit levels from very, very low credit balances and credit limits to where I am now. So I know people don't love to hear that, but that is true with any business. It's very hard to just start something, snap of the fingers, and have it be very successful. I was watching Hormozy's webinar recently. I think he said that 60% of businesses in the United States don't make a profit in any given year. 60%. So if you're profitable, if you make money, you're in the minority, which is insane to me. And I think that just comes from a lot of new businesses starting and then dying in the first year, and then a new wave of businesses starting. But I think it just points to you need to be patient with these things. You should be impatient in the short term. You want to get things done, but then you need to be patient in the long term and the outcome. And in terms of scaling, that's where you want to have the patience. But in terms of getting things done and executing, very impatient. At least I am personally.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about usually these credit cards come with perks, cashback and whatnot. And, so beyond the standard cashback optimization, what other, let's call it financial engineering tactics do you use that sellers might not consider?
Yeah, so most people probably know about cashback. Probably everyone knows about cashback if you're in the online space. So not really any sauce there. The 2 cards that I have, I get minimum 2% cashback on every single purchase. So I've publicly sent out, I'm just trying to figure out a way to run a break-even store and make $1 million in cashback, and then I'll be good. Mostly joking. I'd say maybe like 70% joking. Not entirely, because that cashback, it can add up to be really substantial if you have a large amount of spend. Like the biggest sellers, they're probably raking in multi-6-figure cashback checks just from their credit card spend, which is what? How is that possible? But outside of that, there are ways. So financial engineering, let's just say there's ways to kick your credit card bill being due for a relatively low interest charge, or like cost of capital, if you will. And it just relies on being able to move balances around not traditionally in like a balance transfer sense. So it's something I've done. Don't necessarily recommend it. Not going to talk too much about it, but when you're in a period where you don't necessarily have the cash to pay a credit card, it might be advantageous to just move the balance that you have on that credit card to another credit card that has a later repayment date. And then you can wait for Amazon to pay you out money, wait for, your Walmart sales to kick in, or, wait for your salary, your paycheck to come in, and then be able to pay that down and go from there without incurring the huge 20 something percent APR that they would charge you if you didn't move the balance somewhere else. So that could be, for example, like a line of credit, right? So I have the Amex line of credit. If I were to pull that down and repay it within 1 month, I think I'd just be charged like a fraction of a percent, because the interest doesn't start kicking in until I think it's anywhere from 30 to 45 days after I make the pull. But then after you make the pull, and if you start incurring those charges, they get very egregious, close to what a credit card would be.
Most sellers, lots of sellers are scared of carrying a lot of debt, even if it's backed by inventory. So how do you mentally handle the stress of those balances? And do you have any other kind of risk management systems in place to help you sleep at night?
Good questions. When I was first starting, I wouldn't say I threw risk management out the window. I always knew how I would potentially deal with something for the most part. If something catastrophic happened, like if something catastrophic happened back in that Q4 of 2023, that would have been tough, right? I was peak debt, making peak sales. If Amazon just shut down my store completely, that would have been bad, right? But with that said, at this point, some things that I do, or when you're a smaller business, it makes more sense to be more leveraged and be more aggressive because you have less to work with. And so what's the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario is you file bankruptcy, you start back at zero. And I'm not saying that, you should be excited about that outcome, but that is something that a lot of business owners have to deal with at some point. But with that said, not something I expect doing in the future, not something I've ever had to deal with. What do I do now? Going back to like my repayments, I know exactly how much is coming out of my Amazon balance every single day. And then I use that and I say, okay, I'm going to get, X amount of dollars in. How much do I have to repay? It's a simple math problem. Obviously it's not fun to be leveraged and not have a very small business bank account balance and a very large credit card bill that you're just staring at. And you're like, wow, this is very large and this is very small. That shouldn't be how this works. You get more comfortable with it over time. So I started very small. Again, my entire business is built on $2,000 of initial capital that I had. And that was from working at a cafe at my local gym, birthday money that I just saved. I wasn't really spending much money when I was in high school and then even in college, food, rent for the most part. And so you just build it up over time. You get more comfortable taking on more leverage, but it's typically something you have to get more comfortable with from talking to other people, hearing that they're using leverage, and then all the responsible ways in which they're, using it. So I've been able to go, one thing that I think would be sort of a good experience to talk about, I got regated on just a tremendous amount of inventory back in November of 2024. And so regating basically got restricted on a lot of the products that I was selling, products and brands that I was selling at that point. And it was roughly 80% of my catalog. And so 2024, November, right as we're going into Q4, I'm looking at like peak leverage, for example, and I just get whacked and my sales just off a cliff. And so going through that and being able to find solutions, selling products to other sellers, selling products back to suppliers for some wholesale situations, dropping prices on certain products within my catalog to keep the cash flow coming in, even if I had to take a lower margin on it, pulling things from credit lines, moving balances to credit cards, basically liquidating credit card balances into cash, all things that I did. And so once you go through something like that, it just makes you even more confident that, okay, if worst case scenario happens, if something very bad happens, I know how to deal with it. And so beating it once, you just have to beat it once, and then you can leverage that knowledge and that operational sort of the way in which you operated through that to beat the next case, and also just become more comfortable with continuing to carry those balances.
I hope that you wrote Grandma a really nice thank you note for the $5 birthday check that you've turned into this business.
Honestly, yeah.
No, so actually, on a serious note, though, I am curious. I know you take those daily payouts, and that way you can pay the bill and things like that. But while you're holding on to that cash, are you doing anything with it, like maybe one of those high yield savings accounts that don't have fees for pulling money in and out, or anything like that, to try to get as much return on your cash as possible?
Really good question. Yeah, so I opened up a business bank account with Chase, a business brokerage account. And so it's not a high yield savings account per se. A lot of high yield savings accounts, they don't give you the highest return on your money. What they do with high yield savings account is they basically take it and they put it into a treasury market security. And so this again goes back to my time at Morgan Stanley. I understood what these were. I worked with very large venture funds that were doing this on, with their money when they were just holding it. A lot of big funds, what they'll do is they'll take their money, if it's cash, and put it into a money market security. What that means is that these money market securities, they hold large balances of treasuries. And so a treasury is basically a US government debt security, where if you own it, or you own a part of it in this case, then the government pays you money on a set schedule. With these money market securities, they pay you out on a monthly basis. And so with interest rates being higher, I think they're, what's the short-term rate? It's like 4.5% for the 10-year treasury, something like that. I forget exactly. Usually they're holding these treasury market securities, they're holding a lower term security. So maybe it's, a 30-day treasury security, a 1 year, a 2 year, something like that. And so basically you can put your money into these securities and they pay you out based on how long your money is in that security. And so if I put it in for, let's say I put it in September 1st and I pulled my money out on September 14th to then go and pay off my credit card bill, I would earn interest on that 14 days, and it's paid out typically at the end of the month. So they pay me out the money on September 30th. And, it doesn't make the biggest difference in the world, but it is something that I do just to maximize return. If I have cash sitting there, why not put it to use? And typically there is a little bit of a time delay to get the money into the account and then out of the account. So you also have to be mindful of that. You can typically make a purchase from a business bank account into a treasury market security if they're linked accounts. So both of these accounts, my business bank account and my business brokerage, both at Chase, if I make a purchase, it goes in same day. If I want to sell it, I think it's T-1 or T-2. So basically the trade date -1 or 2 for the cash then to be sent back into my business bank account. So obviously you don't want to be in a situation where your money's sitting in your business brokerage and then you get hit with a big credit card payment and then you go in a huge overdraft. That's happened to me before. And you just find you just figure it out. Like the money comes back. It's just sitting in a different account. You just have to get it back in the red account and hopefully avoid those fees. So.
And is that something that anybody could take advantage of? Like you don't need to necessarily have $100,000 in cash sitting in your account. Could you do it with, say, $1,000?
Some of these securities do have account minimums, like purchase minimums. So, but there's a whole variety of them. If you just go on ChatGPT and say, what are the, please tell me about treasury market funds and also give me a few different ticker symbols for the treasury market funds or treasury money market funds requiring the lowest initial investment or the lowest initial purchase. You'll probably find a bunch of them. They're all relatively accessible. I think like if they're going to have a minimum investment, it's probably going to be $500 to $1,000. So yeah, it's relatively accessible for most sellers in the space.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I picture if Dave Ramsey was listening to this episode, the veins in his forehead that would be popping out by now, and that visual makes me smile. Niki, you've mentioned getting loans from family and friends with interest. I'm curious to dig into that a little bit. How do you structure those deals? And then, of course, you have to mark clear boundaries separating the business relationship from the personal. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So if you don't want to impact your personal relationships, then don't take capital that you can't repay, and don't be too risky with it. So any money that I would borrow from, my parents or my little brother. Those are the only people that I've ever borrowed money from that is not a bank. And it's usually in small amounts, right? So it's relative to the large balances that I take from Chase, that I take from Capital One, that I take from MX, that I take from Lendistry. These are just small amounts that, I'll just say, hey, Lucas, my little brother, you want to send me, a couple $1,000 and I'll pay you out, 5% return. Some of that is just for him to get investing and realize that, money can earn you money. And I think once I learned that, hey, if I just have money, it can make me more, that doesn't make any sense. And so I've always now looked at it like, if I earn $1, I now have a money soldier. And if I just send him out, he can go and recruit more for me, or at least a fraction of himself. And so looking at that, I sort of gamify the whole thing. But going back to sort of the F&F loans, it's relatively simple. My mom and my little brother, they both have Zelle. They'll Zelle me money. I'll log it into a spreadsheet and I'll just put an interest rate, or, I'm going to pay this back at a fixed fee of X% in X days. And then it just sends me a notification when I said I was going to repay it. And then once that happens, I Zelle back the money, I log the interest that I was paid, and then I send that spreadsheet of all the money that I've borrowed and all the money that I've sent back over to my accountant. And then he will ask me questions if I need to, if he needs anything answered. But it's relatively very simple. I don't have strict loan agreements, and I wouldn't recommend this if you're loaning someone money to not have a loan agreement. But this is very, very personal relationship, family relationship, and so they know that I'd never do anything sketchy or not repay or anything like that. They know where to find me.
So, yeah, your business, a couple $1 million a year, like it's no small business. And you talked about spending substantially less time input than in previous years. Can you touch on like what systems you have in place and what automations you're using to get to this level of efficiency?
Yeah, so this will go back to, in the same way that if you want to grow, you find out what your limiting factor is. If you want to take yourself out of the business, you find out what you're doing. You look at everything that you do in a day and you say, how can I replace these things? If it's prep work, get a prep center, right? Or pay someone that can help you with prep locally. That's one thing that I've done more recently. If it's sourcing, how can you automate sourcing? And if it's operations, dealing with returns, dealing with repricing, dealing with all these things, dealing with getting reimbursements, how do you automate these things? And so a lot of it can be automated by software. A lot of it can be automated by a virtual assistant, virtual analyst that does relatively simple things. Because most of Amazon is relatively straightforward. Outside of the sourcing, I'd say sourcing is like the stuff where you need most of like the sauce, if you will. You need to be skilled at like learning these things, understand how to get discount codes, understand different clearance sales and different promotional periods, different seasonality. There's a way to simplify all these things, but I'd say it's the one with the steepest learning curve. Whereas if you just tell someone, I need you to copy this, paste it here, and click a button, that's very easy. You can teach someone how to do that with a 3-minute Loom video. And so my VA, who works 2 hours a day, she does a lot of that sort of stuff, the operational stuff. She's very on top of it. We leverage tools like Identify for reimbursements and sourcing, Keepa also for sourcing, Aura for repricing, and Flip Alert as well for some of the A2A sourcing as well. And so just looking at what am I doing in a day? If I'm sourcing for 4 hours a day, how do I automate those things? How do I look back at my past catalog and figure out what I can repurchase here? How do I become more efficient with the time that I'm spending sourcing? Can I cut out certain sourcing tactics that are taking me just way too long? And there probably are. If you're doing retail arbitrage, it's probably like minimum 1 hour if you go to retail arbitrage. And so, focusing on the highest per hour, maybe even not highest per hour, but just the sourcing methods that get you the furthest with the least amount of time input. And they typically, that typically does go to the highest, the ones that pay you the most per hour. So just always looking at things from an opportunity cost perspective and saying, okay, this can make me money, but how much time? Like, people don't consider the time aspect. I use a lot of software tools that help me cut 30 minutes per month. And if it cuts me 30 minutes per month, I'm willing to pay $50 for that, to just not have to do it. And then I can go do something that can generate me more than $100 per hour, for example. And you can even, drive that further down. Like if you don't have other things that you can go and do that would generate you $20, $50, $100 per hour, then just do that task, right? But it's always opportunity cost, opportunity cost, opportunity cost. What could I be doing, more efficiently? What could I be doing that's better suited for my time that has the highest ROI?
Is there any one particular automation or system that has had the largest return on its investment?
Yes, but I'm not sure I want to talk about it too publicly. So I'll just say that there are ways in which you can automate sourcing. The one that, is no skin off my back that I can share without just giving all the sauce, is your own catalog. You have all the data on the products that you've sold before. Odds are you're losing hundreds or thousands of dollars per month by not going back and reanalyzing those products and seeing if you can buy them. When I first did this back, I think the first time I did it was in the middle of 2023. And it's just like, oh, okay, cool. I have this product that I know I can buy. I know exactly where I bought it. It's at the same price and the buy box price is higher. Wow, that's weird to me. I thought I would go and have to find all new products. But you can just go even further with the automation. You can use tools like Flip Alert and Keepa. Again, going into Keepa, I don't want to share exactly like the deep ways in which I use Keepa, but if you dig into Keepa very aggressively and just consistently over a long period of time, you're going to find ways to use Keepa, which is a $20 tool per month that every single Amazon seller has to make your business substantially more efficient. But I gotta respect people that have paid me for information that probably don't want me to talk about the exact ways in which we use the tool.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. The ROI on learning more about Keepa, no matter what your experience level is incredible. Continues to be that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Amazon is this is an obvious statement, constantly changing. As you told us about your November 24 debacle. So new restrictions pop up, new requirements, algorithm updates, all that stuff. How do you stay ahead of those changes or stay prepared to handle them? And what kind of process do you do as far as remaining flexible?
Yeah. So going back to 2023, that's the best sales month I've ever had. The 635K, 700 in a 30-day period from the end of November through the middle of December. My catalog is probably now consists of 5 to 10% of what I sold in that month. So my catalog has basically been completely redefined with new products, new Grand Slams, all these sorts of things. If you find one Grand Slam product, you can find another. There's hundreds of thousands of products to sell on Amazon, tens of millions, I should say, not hundreds of thousands. And so there's always another niche. There's always something else to find. The first time you go through it, it's going to feel like a punch in the gut. The first time I had a product that was making me a lot of money and then that opportunity went away, I'm like, okay, yeah, I should probably pack it up and quit now. This sucks. Like, this is the worst thing ever. And so, but that happens in every business, right? You have opportunities that, let's just talk about maybe private label, right? Private label can change overnight if a new competitor enters or your listing gets taken down because there's new changes to Amazon. And so just understanding that challenges that happen in your business will deter a significant amount of other people. That means competition down. So that opens up other opportunities. When you do find that new opportunity, maybe it's even better than the one that you had access to. And so just being able to, be flexible and redefine your business, it's just a mentality change of, I like to say arbitrage by definition means inefficiency. If there's arbitrage in it, that means you're just taking advantage of an inefficiency. All inefficiencies will correct over time. If we all found the same product and 20 other people found the same product, eventually the profits are going to be driven lower and lower and lower. Happens in every single business. You think about the gold rush going back, years and years, hundreds of years. The more people that started participating in the gold rush, the less beneficial it became for the next person to then come in and, try and start a gold mining business. It just happens in every single business. You have to be understanding of that and just know that, opportunities change, your catalog will change, and be comfortable with that because that's true in every single business.
I've seen you talk about the 3 pillars of freedom of freedom, like freedom, time, location, and financial. And a lot of entrepreneurs and people, they want to optimize for money first, but you have talked about optimizing for freedom first. Why and how does that change the way that you make decisions in your business?
Great question. Thanks for asking it. So in terms of freedom, those three pillars are basically what comprises freedom. You want to be able to do what you want, when you want to do it, where you want to do it, and not be super worried. Obviously money's no object, but you want to be able to pay for it and comfortably pay for it. What I've always got to, through that lens, looking through, I want to achieve freedom. That's what I care about. How am I going to get there? The first one I always go to is money. So I think most entrepreneurs, even if they're not thinking about it in the sense of, oh, I want to achieve freedom, they are solving for the first step, which is money. Because if you have money, what can you do? You can buy time and location. So if let's just say you get $100 million that just snap of the fingers, it's in your bank account tomorrow. You can then hire people to do all the things that you were doing in your business. Okay, cool. You just solved time. And then location, you can pay other people to do all the things that would require you to be in a certain location. Maybe you want to be in a certain location. Maybe your family doesn't want to move around. Maybe you have kids that go to school. You don't want to pull them up. But you get to choose the location and you have the freedom to choose the location, I think is the point. And so I forget where I got this concept. I think I developed the three pillars kind of ideology, but it just makes sense. I don't want to feel like other people control my income. And, to a degree, Amazon controls my income. I think I'm currently taking steps to separate my personal income and my financial situation from just being dependent on Amazon to being diversified across a variety of different things, investing in stocks, investing in different, alternative assets, Pokemon cards, for example. I've got a box behind me that I picked up just recently, building a software tool, building a community of other Amazon sellers, all these sorts of things. It just goes towards achieving monetary, financial freedom. And I think that if you achieve financial freedom, it just enhances everything about your life. If you're a dick, you're probably going to be even a bigger dick. So you're competing with those people where if you think that you're a good person, I think it's sort of your duty, and you have this kind of, you should want to be rich so that you can amplify your worldview. And you say, I'm a good person. I think what I think is the right way of thinking. And I think the things that I want to do should be done in the world. And so through that lens, it's like, you should get rich and then you should do those things that you think would benefit other people, would benefit the world. You can build things that you think are cool. And you're competing with the people that maybe don't have the same worldview, the people that want to, have ill will towards humanity or whatever, right? But you sort of have this duty of, I want to do right by people. I want to do right by my family. I need assets. I need, resources to do those things. And so that's the lens that I've taken on it, and why I think that financial freedom is the strongest pillar of the three pillars.
Very Rockefeller of you, if I remember my biography right.
I've listened to a long podcast on Rockefeller and his. I think that's part of where I pull that from. But it just kind of makes sense to me, right? It's like Chris, you guys want to do good in the world. If you have more resources to do it, you can have an even bigger impact. And so I used to have this sort of limiting belief that, if you want money, you're a bad person because, that's so vain of you. Why do you want to be rich? Like, just make enough for you and then you'll be okay. But if I want to, build something bigger than me, I want to have a broader impact on people, then, more resources gives you a bigger platform to go and then achieve those things and make the impact that you want to make. So.
So you've mentioned that investing in education early would have saved you from a big loss and a lot of frustration. So what's your kind of model, or what's your strategy as far as deciding when to invest in learning versus trying to dig in and figure it out as you go along?
Yeah. So nearly everything that you could ever want to learn is on YouTube for free. The issue with that is if you're a beginner, you don't know what the good information is. In a lot of cases, you don't know what you need to learn. And you also don't know YouTube's free. I have a YouTube account. Anyone in the world can create a YouTube account and put up whatever garbage they want. or great quality content that they want. And so when you're a complete beginner, you don't know how to filter through that. And so not only would I have saved financially, but also when I first started, I did that in February of 2022. I didn't get over that initial loss and how much I, hated Amazon because of that initial loss for 8 months. And so think about that 8 months. If I had fast forwarded all of my progress, I'd be 8 months further now into the successful Amazon business that I've been able to create. So it just goes back to the time thing. It's like, I think people significantly underweight how important time is. And, I said money's the only thing that matters, right? Or it's the strongest pillar. Once you achieve a certain level, time becomes the only thing that matters. And so you want to be able to get in a financial position to where you can buy back your time. And that's another book. I think that one's right there. Buy Back Your Time, Dan Martell.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I got these covers down. I know it's the blue one. So I think it just goes to show I actually read stuff, and I read and I listen to the people that are ahead of me that have been through this. And it saves me a lot of time of, if he puts all his secrets, his like generalized worldview into a book like this. And that helps me just break mental barriers that I might have. It helps me redefine what I think is important. And all the conclusions, everything that I've gone through, just point to buying information from other people that have already been in your situation and that are more successful than you are right now will benefit you so tremendously, probably better than anything else that you could buy. A watch, I don't own any watch, right? I don't own a Rolex. I don't spend money frivolously because I just know that the money that I would spend on those things could go to making me a better business person, could go towards investing in assets. One specific example I'll give, I think some people might know Alex Hormozy, maybe a large portion of the audience does, but he's just a killer entrepreneur, and he recently had this enormous book launch. And so he was selling this $6,000 sort of workbooks package, and I bought it. It's sitting right behind me right here. And Chris might have it behind him too. Yeah. Did you get the bigger version, or did you get the Money Models book?
I got the Money Models book, and I spent about $400 with them this time around.
Yeah. So I did the $6,000 package, which is the big boy. And he even has like a further, I think one that was $18,000. And so the event itself, masterclass in marketing, in online marketing, but he has this massive consulting business where he charges people tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. And if I can just go and read those lessons, you have to first understand, like, okay, am I someone who can implement these things on my own after absorbing them? And that's a big thing that a lot of people have an issue with, right? They absorb all this information and they're like, okay, cool. That was fun. I learned about this and I got the dopamine hit. But then the next aspect of that is the implementation and the accountability. And so what a lot of coaches do, what a lot of mentors do, people in the info product space that have been through, let's just say selling on Amazon, is they will sell implementation and accountability. Because those two things, it's like why coaches are important in sports. Because if you're just going to go at something willy-nilly, you need direction, you need to know what to focus on, and then you need the implementation and the accountability behind it. And a lot of businesses fail not because of lack of information, but because they're not held accountable and they don't implement the things that they already know. And so if you can look at someone that's been where you are and say, hey, you were successful, how did you do that? What should I do here? What should I focus on now? That is just so valuable. And it's something that I've paid thousands of dollars for on a consistent basis over the past 5 years. And so I say it's like one of the keys to my success. And I know, you got the only thing is paying for education. You have to make sure the person that you're paying is not gonna just dip out and say, hey, this was fun. Thanks for your money. I actually don't do this. I'm not good at it, and I'm gonna block you. That's a bad situation, obviously. So finding someone that, has a lot of content out there, you watch their free content and you understand, okay, this person knows what they're talking about. Do they have a program that fits my profile? Could they actually help me? So going through that process of learning, is this the right thing for me? Definitely recommend, doing all of the due diligence that you possibly can to, and then also using your gut to say, okay, is this going to help me? Do I truly deep down think that this is the right thing to do? So those are the different lenses in which I approach information buying, and then also information selling, because now I'm on the other side of it. I have, I think 14 people, or 12 to 14 people that are in my inner circle at this point. And it's a very small group. And I just try and make sure that none of those people have a negative experience and don't get sort of disenchanted by purchasing information, because I think I would be doing them just an enormous disservice if I were to be their source of a bad experience, and then they don't do it in the future because of that. So, and I know a lot of people unfortunately have that experience and then they're hesitant to do it again. So those are all the things that I would do if you're considering doing, purchasing any sort of info product or group or community.
I've got a kind of a twofer here. So I know that you were a college athlete. And I asked this question to a friend of mine just the other day. How much impact do you think being an athlete has had on your business and on your, growth mindset and things like that?
Yeah, it's tremendous. The first time I played a team sport was when I was 5 years old. I played tackle football since I was 5. I played for 10 years up through my junior year in high school. And you learn a lot of the accountability and implementation. And so from when I was young, I've just had it ingrained in me that hard work gets you to a result. Hard work beats talent if talent doesn't work hard, all these different sayings. And then also, if you have an indisputable sort of body of your own work that, you've proven to yourself, if I work hard at this thing, then I get a good result. I think in sports, for example, with track, I was not good at long distance running. Then I started running more miles and more miles and more miles and putting in the time and effort, doing the work, sweating a whole lot. I don't think I cried very often, or bled very often. So mostly just sweat, not blood, sweat, and tears. But it's indisputable that I worked very hard and that I was able to get faster. So I got the result that I wanted. And so just taking that sort of anecdotal proof that you have, no one can say that you didn't do those things in sports. And even if you're, you don't have to be a D1 athlete to go through this, right? You could say, I want to run a 5K, and you've never run a 5K before. And then you go out and you train and you do all these things, or you want to lift a certain weight. And so you go and you start working out in the gym. And so these things just teach you hard work and implementation and accountability lead to better results. And that's the same exact, the same framework that I've taken and applied it to Amazon. If I put in the hours, I learn the accountability, and then I implement those things, I will get a good result. And so just the same framework applies. And I think it's absolutely foundational. And so, it's, if you're, I like to say these things, if you're an athlete in high school or college, and then you've been a sneaker reseller, you can do any business model, whatever you need to do. Like, you can do anything, you can learn anything. And I think it also just goes back to learning. So you have to be willing to learn. And I was an athlete that went from football to cross country in college, cross country and track. And then I went from cross country and track to rugby at a high level. And so those things just involve relearning all these different things. And so being excited to relearn and just take the frameworks with you and let your knowledge and your mentality compound into your next venture, I think is just tremendously important and foundational.
Very good. We always like to do a little bit of a lightning round at the end. Do you have a piece of advice that you give people that is contrarian, that makes people give you kind of a side eye when you tell them that piece of advice?
I'll keep it Amazon specific, and then if I think of another one, I'll spit that one out too. But don't do test buys after a certain period. A lot of people want to do test buys because they don't have their own data. Eventually, you need to become good enough at sourcing, looking at your past data. And I'd say this is sort of just getting more comfortable and breaking sort of mental barriers. You don't necessarily need to test buy. If you look at all the data and you think it's going to do well, go heavy on that product. So that's something that, it just significantly decreases your amount of time from initially finding a lead to making a significant amount of money from that lead. Because if you buy a product and then you have to wait for 10 units to sell and see how fast they sell, then you could be making just a ton of money if you bought heavier and it ends up selling well. And so just looking at it from a worst case scenario, what could happen if the worst case scenario happens? If the worst case scenario is that you break even, it's not that bad. What's the best case scenario? Oh, 40% ROI in a month. So it's just, doing the math, doing a risk assessment, and then jumping. That's sort of a piece of contrarian advice within the Amazon space. No test buys.
Nice. I love the two book recommendations that you've already given. So, but I'm curious. Let's isolate just the last 6 months, maybe. What's a book, podcast, or even a YouTube video that has had a substantial impact on your life or business?
Man, I would listen to, I forget I think it was on Joe Rogan, but Dana White on Joe Rogan. I think he was on there, if not another one. He has a few podcasts that he went on where it's a lot of the same content within those podcasts, but I would listen to one of Dana White's podcasts because it's just see an opportunity, learn, fail, have people tell you suck. And it's just like the traditional sort of entrepreneurial journey. And now obviously he's achieved awesome results for himself. Then in terms of book, that's one I was just grabbing here, but I would read The Art of the Deal by Trump. Politics aside, he's in charge of our country right now. And I, just personal anecdote, had a very different view of who Trump was when I was in college, very liberal college, growing up in a very liberal area, than I do now that I'm in the real world. And I think an important part of that is getting sort of ground truth data, and at least building your own personal sort of, view of the person from a first party perspective, as opposed to hearing something from someone else, from a third party, or even from CNN or Fox or any of these different platforms. Hearing what the person has to say, hearing how they think. And, obviously he's achieved a lot. He's the most powerful man in the world right now. And so being able to go back and see what he was talking about 40 years ago that this book was written. If you went to the 10 people that thought the worst about me in the entire world, you'd think I'm a horrible person and that I suck. If you went to the 10 people who thought the best of me in the entire world, you'd think I'm the best person. But just depending on who you talk to, you're going to get completely polar anecdotes on either end. And so going and actually talking to the individual, or at least hearing the individual side of the story and their thoughts, I think is super important, especially the person who's dictating policy and influencing capital markets, influencing interest rates, even though he's not supposed to a certain degree, is important to, especially in today's climate.
What is a purchase that you've made in the past year under $500 that has had a big impact either on your life or your business?
Another great question. I like to make money. I like the online space. And so I'll talk about this one. And it goes back again, just buying information. I paid $40 for a one-on-one call with a large sort of Pokemon investing influencer. And so I was able to learn this new sort of business model / investing opportunity. And now I've put a substantial amount. This was 3 months ago that I did this call. And it's sort of, some of this is dependent on where we are in the Pokemon market and just the trading card game collectible market. But I did this $40 30-minute call. And then I invested some money, and I've already made substantially more than $40. I think I've probably made 100 times more than $40 just in the past 3 months from implementing some of the things we talked about. So I just can't emphasize enough how important and like foundational investing in knowledge and talking to people more experienced than you really is, and how it can just help you achieve tremendous things.
Where can people follow you? Where can they learn more about your inner circle or Identify Suite? Where would you send people after this episode?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say on Twitter, I'm the most active. I'm also on Instagram and YouTube, all under @Niki Moore. And I'm posting YouTube videos probably every week or two at this point. I post on Twitter basically every single day, and I'm working on the Instagram. So you can also sign up for my email list, nicholasmoore.com. And yeah, Identify Suite is just @Identify Suite on Twitter. We also have a Facebook group. And so, yeah. Also on my YouTube videos, you'll probably see I have a link to just a free WAP community. You go there, it's better than the majority of paid stuff on the internet. It's just all the things that I used to scale, and it's completely free. You're just gonna need a WAP account, and you're gonna have to tell me what your goal is for how much money you wanna make with Amazon. Just those two things you get in there for free. Mostly for beginners. I don't know how sophisticated your audience is, probably not going to be worth it for you if you know the majority of how Amazon works. But if you just want to double check from someone who, I'm pretty good at this point. And so if you want to see my take on the basics, then jump on over there.
Perfect. I'll make sure to link all that below the video here.
You're the man.
But we always end with a quote of the week, and Chris came up with these. I thought this one was pretty apropos. It's by Richard Branson. It's, you don't learn to walk by following rules, you learn by doing and by falling over. I think it seems like you're pretty willing to fall over sometimes and come back a little bit stronger. So I thought that one was pretty appropriate.
Yeah, let me throw one out there that's just I'm rephrasing. I don't know the exact quote, but if you knew that you were only 100 fails away from being hugely successful, how quickly would you want to fail? So along the same lines. And I think it's, people are always afraid to look silly, to fail, to have to confront. I put out effort and it didn't go the way I wanted it to, but it's really the key to success. And, going through that suffering just builds a better entrepreneur and a better person.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Awesome. This has been great, Niki. I appreciate you hanging out with us for a little while. Again, all the links will be down in the show notes. And guys, thanks for hanging out with us. We'll see you in the next episode. That's the pod.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to Clear the Shelf with Chris and Chris. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a screenshot on your phone and share it to Facebook, Instagram, or your favorite FBA group, and be sure to tag me and let me know why you liked it and what you'd like to hear more from us in the future. Also, I'd like to give you some free gifts for listening. Head over to rabbittrailchallenge.com and repricerchallenge.com for some free courses to further your business. Thanks for listening.